Is Peter Zeihan the Jim Cramer of geopolitics? Peter Zeihan has become famous on YouTube and the podcast circuit as a know-it-all geopolitical expert. His most famous and sensational prediction is that China will collapse politically and economically in the next decade. In this video, we will take a look at this guy's a fraud or a true geopolitical wizard. First off, Peter Zeihan has some serious guts to make such a bold prediction about China. He's got to know that he's upsetting a lot of people by saying this. So let's see if his bold beliefs are based on fact or sensationalism. The main argument that Peter Zeihan has against China are based on demographic collapse, collapse of consumption and labor, lack of vital resources, housing collapse, and the collapse of the government. Let's start with demographic collapse. His main argument is based on the Chinese demographic collapse. He claims the Chinese population will be halved by 2050 due to the fact that the one-child policy has created an upside-down population pyramid and also an imbalance of males and females. Basically, China is aging fast and will lose a significant portion of its population in the next decades, and it will be irreversible. The basis of his argument here is true. A demographic collapse can indeed spell doom for any country, and Peter Z is definitely correct that China has a demographic problem. China is a difficult place to get statistics on. Many experts have taken a look at China's demographics, and Peter seems to be using the most pessimistic forecast. Peter's forecast is that by 2050, the population will be halved. Many other prominent experts have predicted that this won't happen until the year 2100, which is a notable difference. There are also many countries in Europe that face very difficult demographic problems such as Spain, Italy, Germany, and Sweden. When it comes to demographic decline, the only way to save yourself from a demographic collapse is to either increase immigration or to encourage more reproducing. Peter Z says that China has never had a welcoming immigration policy and that culturally it would be difficult to implement because the population is so homogeneous and anti-immigration. Regarding increasing birth rates, yes, the government is encouraging family creation, but it does appear too little, too late. While Peter Z looks at the worst case scenario for the demographic collapse, the basis of his argument here is strongest. A country with well below replacement population, an ineffective immigration policy, and a lopsided ratio of males to females will face difficult times concerning demographics. So overall, on demographics, he's probably exaggerating the timeline, but his argument is pretty rock solid. The second biggest point Peter makes is that China will face economic destruction. Basically, what he's saying is that there are not enough young people replacing older people who are retiring. Most consumption happens when people are in their 20s, 30s, and 40s, buying big ticket items like cars, houses, and expensive consumer goods, as these are the ages for family creation. The lack of consumption will hurt the economy and lead to an implosion. Also, according to Peter Z, because there's a shortage of young labor, labor costs have increased by a factor of 14 since 2000. Mexican labor is 1/3 the cost of Chinese labor right now. The results of this are obvious in that a lot of nations will move production from China to lower cost nations. Mexico has already become the US's main trading partner. Having a smaller workforce can definitely be a problem. For the short run, China can increase the retirement age as it currently stands at 60 for men and 55 for women. Also, they can make a push to get more workers from remote villages. Yes, higher labor costs are a problem, but it just means they will have to compete in higher end production, and that's exactly what they're trying to do. Japan has done a very effective job on this, and that's exactly what China is trying to replicate. When it comes to solar and EV batteries, China already dominates the world market. China has already done an amazing job rebuilding its infrastructure from roads to bridges to high-rises to bullet trains. Here in the US, we don't even have a high-speed rail system. In my home state of California, we've tried for decades to build a high-speed rail system, and so far, we've spent billions and we have little to show for it. I gotta believe that a country that can build amazing skyscrapers, bridges, roads, and hundreds of miles of high-speed rail can adapt and start making higher-end products like Japan. So overall, on this point, I agree with Peter Z that fewer workers is a problem and will cause labor costs to go up. But what I don't agree with is that China can adapt, and they've already shown amazing adeptness in some areas from batteries to solar to infrastructure. Also, as we enter the age of AI, who knows what AI will do for labor, as it seems that robots can be assisting us greatly in factories in the near future. The last area that Peter Z says will collapse China is its housing bubble, resource problem, and political instability. His argument is that China relies heavily on importing crucial goods, food, and energy. Also, growth is fueled by debt, and the returns are diminishing. He also states China has a huge housing and asset bubble problem. Lastly, authoritarian Xi Jinping is increasingly becoming isolated. The strongest point that Peter Z makes has to do with China's housing bubble. It's indeed a historic and colossal housing bubble that makes the US 2008 crisis look tame. Chinese households have about 70% of their wealth tied to housing. Housing has been the best ticket for middle and lower classes to achieve wealth. A big real estate downturn can be catastrophic for the economy, and this is already happening. While the housing sector is already in big trouble, I believe the government will step in to limit damage and prevent contagion. Preventing a full-blown housing collapse will be China's toughest challenge, and yes, this can definitely cause huge economic pain and probably a collapse, but I have to believe the government will do all it can to prevent this. According to Peter Z, China also faces a food and energy disaster as it's dependent on other nations. The problem with this is that China and Russia's relationship has never been closer. Also, China has forged relationships with Iran, Venezuela, and Saudi Arabia. Also, China is leading the world in solar and battery production. If EVs are the future, the forefront will be China. If solar is the future, China will be at the forefront as well. Yes, China does not produce a lot of food as farmland is not as productive as places like the US, but that doesn't mean it will starve. The Chinese have poured trillions into infrastructure. According to Zeihan, this capital-intensive model eventually reaches a point where there's diminishing returns, and that's what's happening now. After all, there's so many roads, bridges, government buildings that you can build. Yes, this is true, but China is now a leader in building infrastructure for other countries, and just like other countries, it has to adapt as well. Overall, here's my final conclusion of Peter Zeihan. He's been predicting China's meltdown since 2005. In 2010, he said that it would happen within 5 to 10 years. I would say that his argument on the demographic collapse is really hard to dispute. China's population will be halved by 2050 or 2100, and that problem seems irreversible. And given the culture, the solution through immigration seems unlikely. Before Peter came along, I didn't hear about the seriousness of this problem, so I'll give him a ton of credit. Regarding other areas, labor, resources, asset bubble, political instability, Peter Zeihan makes some really compelling arguments, but I do have some doubts. The Chinese people and government are hardworking, sober, realistic, intelligent, and they're not crazy. We are already underway in the AI revolution. No one knows what the end result of the AI revolution will be, but it is possible that robots will replace humans in factories, and that will greatly diminish the negatives of a demographic collapse. The last point I'll make that makes me really question Peter Zeihan is that any country's future relies on the ambition, intelligence, and productivity of its citizen. Of course, a country's institutions and political climate also matter greatly, but the skills of the citizens are paramount. Chinese people are among the most educated, hardworking people in the world. Chinese universities are expected to graduate 77,000 STEM PhDs per year compared to 40,000 in the US in 2025. There's no question that there's no shortage of brain power in China. That itself is a main reason I will not bet against them, along with the fact that they are getting so much technology from the US and other countries, even if it's through espionage. No one knows what the future holds, but if the Chinese government creates programs and institutions that promote innovation and keep the ambitious youth working in China, its future has no limit. If you liked my video, please push the like button and subscribe, and I wish you a great day. Thank you.